Julie here to Breaking Convention for quite some years, and I'm really pleased that we've achieved it this year. And when I asked Julie, I'm not going to describe too much about who she is in the introduction, because the purpose of this part is a discussion between us, and so we will talk about our work. When I asked Julie to come and do this, she said, I'd rather not do just a sort of stand in front of the audience and talk lecture type thing. She said, why don't I do something with you? Why don't we just stand there and chat to each other?
Let's just have a chat.
So it's a bit of an experiment, and I hope you bear with us. I always figured myself to be quite a relaxed kind of person, but I've prepared loads of questions, and she's just like, whatever.
I'm like, no, we're just going to talk. It's going to be fun. Like, I could easily talk for an hour. I'm sure you could easily talk for an hour. We'll just chat for a half hour. But we are both psychiatrists, and if we were both analysts, I think it probably would go as well. If you ask your analysts, like, if they have children, and they will say, well, what is your fantasy of how many children you have? And we used to do this thing called shrink ping pong, where we would just ask questions back and forth. How are you doing today? How would it help your therapy to know how I'm doing today? So it won't be like that.
I will sort of sit down and
answer these questions. Make yourself comfortable then. I'd say you should lie down, actually. That's the conversation.
That's perfect.
So one of the reasons why I really wanted to just chat with Ben is that he and I have a lot in common. We're both very involved with MDMA research. But we are also both married with children. We are both psychiatrists. We're both musicians. We both play guitar and trumpet. Which I just thought was very coincidental. So I imagine that there are other coincidences. But I know one way that we differ, which is I think how we feel about the hippies.
Okay, well,
because my children will be the first to tell you that I am a hippie. They consider myself to be a hippie. And Ben, even though he's wearing a flower in his lapel, would probably say, what, that you're not?
No, not at all. Okay, so that's a really, really good point, because that poses the question, what is a hippie? And do you have to look like a certain thing, and do you have to dress a certain way, and do you have to take certain drugs, and do you have to go to certain festivals, and or even hold certain opinions to be a hippie? How do you know I'm not a hippie?
I don't know you're not a hippie, but it sounded like that you wanted to sort of, you're writing specifically about haircuts or things like that. Maybe you think that you're sort of anti-hippie. Am I wrong?
Okay, so the very much the thrust of my work for the last 15 years in this field is increasing accessibility of psychedelics to the wider public, and particular to my patients in the NHS. And I love hippies, and I love the hippie community, and I love festivals, and I love parties, and they're much more exciting than doctors. Hippies are.
But those are not your patients, clearly.
My patients are not hippies?
Right.
And here's a good point, there aren't that many people like this. Yeah, at least this is a pretty small microcosm of intense hippiness here. And they're not even all hippies, but intense knowledge and understanding about psychedelic drugs. And if you step outside these doors into the street, the vast majority of people will tell you ecstasy, one pill will kill, it causes holes in your brain, it causes long-term neurotoxic damage.
It drains your spinal fluid,
causes
Parkinson's.
And LSD makes you want to fly and jump out of windows.
And peel yourself like an orange.
And makes you go mad. So we somewhere, I believe, are going wrong, not in what we do in these four walls, because this is great, but we are not disseminating this as well as we should. It's 70 years since Albert came up with his thing. It's 50 years since it went global with the Summer of Love. And we have rates of LSD consumption in this country, it's difficult to tell, possibly about 2% of the population have tried LSD. That's rubbish after 70 years. Yeah? For an incredibly important tool that's almost virtually physically inert in terms of its toxicity. So somehow we're not getting the message across. What do you think?
I think LSD is not for everyone, and it may be that 2% is what is safest. I mean, obviously, we know how important it is to have set and setting. Also, in America, for a long time, it was very hard to get any LSD at all. It's much easier to get psilocybin. What everybody seems to be talking about now in America, and I imagine here too, is microdosing, which is making me think that those numbers are probably going to go up.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on microdosing?
I have a lot of patients who are microdosing or coming to me with questions about microdosing. So I think Ayelet Waldman's book really got a lot of people talking about it. And I know that in the sort of technology-based communities in New York City and out in the Bay Area in California, it seems like it's very popular. So Jim Fadiman is somebody I've known for a long time and I respect, and I'm glad that he's sort of herding the cats of all the data. He's got something like 1,500 anecdotal reports of people microdosing that he's trying to organize. So I appreciate what he's doing. I think that there's something there, microdosing, and I have patients who have asked me to help them get off their antidepressants because they would like to microdose, and I have done that with them, and these patients have had pretty good results. So I definitely have at least a handful of people who, instead of taking a daily dose of SSRIs, are taking a very small dose of psilocybin or LSD every 3 or 4 days. And I feel like they're doing really well. So I think that there's something there. I really like the idea of people being able to treat themselves and sort of take care of their own symptoms. And one of the things I've been talking about for years is this idea that the daily dose of SSRIs sort of sweeps the symptoms under the carpet, and you end up with like a lumpy carpet, but you don't care. And what's nice about something like MDMA-assisted psychotherapy or psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy is it takes the rug out back and bang the hell out of it, and while it's being cleaned, you vacuum the floor, and then you put the rug down, and it's possible dust will accumulate over time, but you've gotten rid of a lot of dirt. With one of the analogies I give with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy a lot is this idea that you're sort of digging down to where this malignant thing is that you need to pull out and examine. And with regular psychotherapy, that's a very painful, slow process. But when you use a catalyst, like psilocybin or LSD or MDMA, it helps the therapy go faster, and it's more effective and more efficient. I think the microdosing is very different from that. I think that there's a lot to be said for sort of macrodosing to really clean up, and maybe microdosing is still a little bit of that sweeping dirt on the carpet, but I still feel like intuitively it feels like probably a better way to go than the daily dose.
Yeah, so it's certainly the flavour of the month, microdosing, isn't it?
It is.
My thoughts around microdosing are very similar. It's, with anything that patients come to me and say, Dr. Sessa, I found doing this really works. What do you think about it? And I say, if it works and it's safe, keep doing it.
Right.
Yeah. If they say, I need to, when I wave a crystal over my belly button and face east, then my knee pain is better. I'm like, keep doing that, man. Keep doing it. Yeah. And so, why not? Now, obviously, if people have treatments or self-remedies that are potentially dangerous and going to cause them harm, then obviously, I think as a doctor, you have an obligation to give them some education around that. But I'm certainly not the kind of doctor who is dogmatically fixed on only the established treatment regimes, because we know they're not good enough. And there's lots of alternative therapies that if they work and they're safe, then why not? But the thing about microdosing that interests me slightly less is in some time it feels a bit like SSRIs. And the whole reason I'm interested in MDMA psychotherapy is the idea of not having to take a drug all the time.
Right.
The idea of a quick, short, focused piece of psychotherapy with medicine and then not be on drugs. Now, yeah, tiny little doses of LSD or psilocybin are far better than the SSRIs you throw down your throat in terms of toxicity. And actually the dosing regimes are shorter as well, a few days on, a few days off. So, of course it's better than SSRIs, but it's just the concept of it that you keep taking a drug. And believe it or not, as a pharmacologist and a psychiatrist, it's my intention to get everyone off drugs. which is why I like psychotherapy and why I like MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, because whilst obviously people focus on the drug part, like, oh, you druggies with your MDMA psychotherapy, people interested in psychedelic psychotherapy primarily are therapists, psychotherapists. So I'm a psychotherapist at heart, and that's why I like psychedelics, because for me they are a tool for focused psychotherapy. And that's how people get cured. They get cured by talking and connecting. And no drug can do that.
Right.
So that bit about microdosing, I can see it's good, and I really like what you say about it giving the patient that control. But let's see where it goes.
Right. I mean, speaking of people being able to control their own medicine, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I really like the idea of cannabis, people being able to grow their own medicine and not having to go to the doctor or the pharmacist or their insurance company, that they just go to their garden and they're, first of all, I think it's therapeutic to garden and to be outside and to connect with the earth and to get some sunshine. But to grow your own medicine and take responsibility for your own healthcare, I love the whole idea of that. You said something about crystals and knee pain, and it made me think about the placebo response, which I think in psychiatry is huge. When you do a study and you give an SSRI versus placebo, the placebo patients do pretty well. It's like 30-40% of people respond to placebo. So, and I talk about in my work, and maybe you have this too in your private practice in psychiatry, like, if I'm going to prescribe a medicine, I really sell it, because maybe you don't sell it. The other thing is, there are some people who really do need the daily dose. And I wrote this book called Moody Bitches about how women are sort of over-pathologized, women who are sort of maybe naturally, cyclically emotional, and that's normal and natural, but a lot of women are taking antidepressants that they really may not need. But I think, we should sort of provide the caveat that there are people who really do need a daily dose of psychiatric medicine. I have patients with schizophrenia who need to take antipsychotics every day. I have patients with bipolar disorder who need mood stabilizers every day. So we don't want to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and say nobody needs these meds. But I think we both agree wholeheartedly that people are being over-medicated. That it's very easy to give somebody a prescription and send them out of your office, and it's hard to actually work with a patient and figure out what's really wrong. And this idea of connection and connectedness, it's a really big deal. I'm glad Robin spoke of it. I just heard Johan Hari, who was also talking about it. I've been pitching a book to my agent for a while now about this idea of being in a united state, feeling connected to yourself, feeling connected to nature, feeling connected to the universe. It seems crucial and important, and I'm glad a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah, and what's difficult, I suppose, is these words are difficult for conservative doctors. Words like connectivity, enlightenment, bliss. Doctors start to sweat and get anxious if you're talking about that. I believe these are scientific, psychological words. I believe these are psychological states of brain, and they are language that should belong as much in medicine and psychology as they do in the church. And I think we need to wrestle these words off the religions and the church and say, I want for my patients, I want to prescribe some enlightenment and some bliss and some connectivity, because these are psychological states that they deserve to have without having to go to the church to get them.
And so, would you agree that SSRIs actually make it harder to feel bliss?
Yeah, okay, so SSRIs. I just want to go back also to the idea of just psychiatric prescribing in general. Psychiatrists get criticized as, you guys just give drugs. Now, that's so not the case. Every psychiatrist I know, psychiatrists are among the most holistic of all doctors. I spend more time taking people off drugs than I do putting them on drugs. And in psychiatry, it's not just about medicine. You really have a good grasp of the whole psychosocial aspect of the patient. My patient is a child or a teenager, or they're a parent, they are a father or a teacher, they have a house, they have work. I'm interested in where they live, what they eat, who they see, what their relationships are, what their future's like, what their childhood was like, the places they hang out, the things they enjoy, their hobbies, and that is what good psychiatry is about. So the criticism that psychiatrists just give drugs, if that's your example of psychiatrists, then they've been poorly trained and they're not doing their job properly, because that shouldn't be the work of psychiatry. Psychiatry is a multidisciplinary input for medicine, and it's deeply holistic. So drugs are a small part of it. And the drugs we have in psychiatry are crap on the whole. And they haven't changed for around 50 years. The concept of masking symptoms with maintenance therapies you take every day is poor and dangerous and disrespectful to patients. And there are patients who do need daily drugs. And, you know, schizophrenia, we've seen it. You take someone off their antipsychotics, they become unwell, they come back to hospital,
Right.
they get unwell. You put them back onto antipsychotics, they stabilise, they get out. It's a very strong effect size, we know that. Now, there are loads of other complementary therapies around that, and there are plenty of examples, anecdotally you may know some, of alternatives to antipsychotics. But they are small and they are anecdotal, and the evidence is very strong about the benefit of antipsychotics. But antipsychotics are not nice drugs, and there's heaps of side effects.
Right.
And, okay, so they slow you down, and your speech is slurred, and you drool, and you put on weight. Those are not good side effects, but they're probably preferable to running down the street naked with a traffic cone on your head, believing you're Jesus, every day. You know, that's dangerous stuff. It's very dysfunctional and antisocial, and you cannot function. So it's a very awful situation that we're in where we have those. But I think, and I'm almost going to stop, I think there's a whole load of psychiatric problems, the anxiety disorders and a lot of the mild affective disorders, end-of-life anxiety, PTSD. Now these things we could almost do completely without the drugs.
meds.
And that's where the psychotherapies come in.
You know, one thing that happens a lot is that people get on antidepressants and then they stay on antidepressants. You and I know that these drugs really were designed to be used for 6 months, maybe a year, and then you taper off and stop. I have people who, you know, are taking it for decades, and when they try to come off the meds, they feel terrible. And then, because they feel terrible, instead of thinking like, oh, I'm in withdrawal from these meds, they say, oh, I must really have a chemical imbalance and I need these meds. And I hear that over and over again. It's really hard to come off of antidepressants. And I think it's important for psychiatrists to have an end game. If you put somebody, you know, if you break your leg, you wear a cast for a few months and then you get the cast off and you have physical therapy to rehabilitate your leg. You don't wear the cast forever. So I think it's important to have an end game. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if you use a lot of Lamictal. I have patients who are on SSRIs who want to microdose or who want to have an ayahuasca experience. And so I will taper them off the SSRIs, but I will put them on Lamictal, which is lamotrigine.
Lamotrigine.
Which is one of the few medicines...
That's an American brand name for the drug lamotrigine.
Right, lamotrigine, which is one of the few medicines that you don't have to stop for an ayahuasca ceremony. So in my patients who really need something but do want to explore microdosing or ayahuasca, that is something that I've sort of recently discovered. I don't know if you have any opinion about that, or I mean, is ayahuasca sort of a thing here where people are doing ceremonies? Because in New York, it's, you know, it's become very popular.
I've heard of ayahuasca. It's very hard to judge the extent of underground stuff by
Right.
definition, isn't it? If you could judge it and measure it, then it's not underground. So yeah, there's heaps of opportunities for underground ayahuasca and other ceremonies within this country. So the SSRI drugs. What about microdosing MDMA?
So this was something that I heard about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, that people were taking very low doses of MDMA in order, like sort of treating it like Adderall or Ritalin, where they would, you know, use it to help with focus or productivity. You know, as much as I was going to say I love MDMA, which is not that simple. I mean, I have a long, complicated history with MDMA. I met Rick Doblin back in 1985, right before he formed MAPS, and right before MDMA was made illegal. And Rick likes to tell a story about how he and I took MDMA together on the day that it was made illegal, but he's wrong. It was on the last day that it was legal. And I'm not kidding. I'm positive about this. I very clearly remember that we were not breaking the law when we were together.
Because that would be a terrible thing to do.
It would be, right. And you know, I'm the medical monitor for MDMA PTSD studies in America, where I live. But I do still have this sense that taking MDMA too often, too frequently, too high a dose is a very bad idea. So I worry about microdosing just because of the frequency.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of like it's the same principle of taking an SSRI, and I'd rather go for the big dose and the peak experience coupled with psychotherapy to not have to take something every day, certainly when it comes to MDMA, so I think we agree there. But a couple of things. Are we being really irresponsible here by criticising psychiatric drugs? Or are we being really hypocritical? Because we also do prescribe them, and yet we come to these places and we slag off SSRIs left, right and centre, and then we go back to our clinics and write out SSRIs.
I don't slag
Why do we do that?
as you do. I do feel hypocritical. One of the things that I really had to grapple with, I'm just looking at my husband Jeremy because we spoke about this a lot. When I was writing Moody Bitches, I really had to sort of deal with the fact that I was being hypocritical because every time I go to my office, I write prescriptions for SSRIs, and then I publish a book saying, a lot of people don't need them and you really shouldn't take them. I don't think that we're being irresponsible. I do feel hypocritical because I do still do a tremendous amount of prescribing in my office. And, the sort of bottom line or the truth is that the SSRIs do make you feel less anxious and less sad. And they are really effective. That's why people stay on them. They get on them and they stay on them. Even though they can't cry, they're not very horny, it's very hard to climax. They still stay on them because life is a little bit easier on them. But yes, hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean, when I prescribe any of these psychiatric drugs like SSRIs, I prescribe them with a caveat. A caveat, and I will say, look, you are depressed or anxious or whatever because of this awful situation you're in.
Right.
You have a rubbish house, you have no job, you have 3 generations of hopelessness in your family, you were abused as a child, society has maligned you, you are excluded on the grounds of race or gender or sexuality, you live in a terrible community that's rife with drug misuse and addiction, and you're unhappy. And this little packet of pills ain't gonna solve that. So,
right, you adjust to the environment.
But they may make you feel a bit better. And the analogy I give when I'm doing my talks on MDMA is taking aspirin or paracetamol for a fever. It's great. It brings your temperature down a bit and you feel a bit better. Why not? You'd want to do that if you've got a high temperature, but aspirin or paracetamol is not an antibiotic.
Right. It's not going to treat the problem.
It's not going to kill the bugs that are causing the infection.
Right.
But you still take it because you feel better. So there is a place for these drugs. And so I do prescribe them to these patients. And I say, they'll make you feel a bit better. Because going back to what you said before, if you prescribed something and said this is rubbish and won't work,
right.
It's not going to work. And I had this debate with David Nutt a few years ago, when 10 years ago probably, when he was being quite critical of psychotherapy as a tool. And he said it's all about active, effective drugs. And I said to him, this is just rubbish, David, because I think if you go to a GP and they prescribe you antibiotics and they tell you these are not going to work, they're not going to work very well. So we have to instill hope into our patients all the time, and the placebo effect is absolutely critical.
But
it's an active part of getting better.
Yeah, I agree. But maybe if you put somebody on meds, they have the energy and the focus and the drive to make some changes in their life. So this is what I do in my practice. Somebody comes to me and they want antidepressants, I give them antidepressants, but then while they're coming back for refills, we start talking about what are you eating? Are you exercising? Are you getting outside? Are you connecting with the earth or with other people? I'm very worried. My husband Jeremy and I talk about this quite a bit about how isolated people are because everyone is on their little devices. If you walk down the street in New York City, literally everyone is staring at their phones. It's not as bad here. It's really, there's no eye contact, there's no human touch, there's no, smelling pheromones. We're very isolated, and it's making us
There'll be apps
sick.
for that soon.
And also, you mentioned food. Whenever I start talking to my patients about what do you eat for breakfast and what's your diet like, they all say the same thing to me. They say, no doctor has ever asked me what I eat before. I'm like, how crazy is that? It's like what kind of fuel are you putting in the machine? That matters. What you eat matters. And we have a whole chapter on food and Moody Bitches because, I also have a chapter on inflammation, which I'm very interested in the connection between inflammation and depression, inflammation and anxiety, inflammation, obesity, insomnia, and there's a lot there. There's a huge body of research now supporting the idea that anything you can do to decrease inflammation will help your brain work better. So that includes having an anti-inflammatory diet. things like meditation, exercise, sunshine, cardio, sex, human connection, those are all sort of anti-inflammatory activities. Also, cannabis is an anti-inflammatory medicine. So I think that there's a place for cannabis in sort of preventative health maintenance.
I want to ask a couple more questions about psychedelics that come my way a lot, and I wanted to know what your answers to this is.
Okay.
It's come out quite a lot this weekend, actually. You doctors medicalising psychedelics. Are we going to take something away from the specialness of psychedelics if we medicalise them? And in particular, in terms of cannabis industry in the United States, has this killed the joy of cannabis? Is there a problem of corporates and big pharma getting involved with psychedelics and cannabis?
I think that there potentially could be problems with sort of commerce and capitalism getting involved. I mean, I really like the idea, like I said, of people being able to grow their own medicine. You can grow your own mushrooms, you can grow your own cannabis. Like in my ideal world, people grow their own medicines, and that is subversive, right? I mean, it goes against our sort of capitalist structure. But are we going to take away the magic of psilocybin or cannabis? Not bloody likely. I don't think so.
I agree. And in the last talk I gave earlier today, somebody said to me about, are we over-medicalising psychedelics? I said, we are under-medicalising psychedelics. We need more medicalisation because we want them in clinics for patients. And underground stuff is not going to go away. There will always be festivals, there will always be recreational use, there will always be this beautiful culture. And there should also be blister packets of psilocybin in pharmacies for patients who don't want to go to festivals. So medicalisation is important, and it's not going to destroy the underground. That's my opinion.
I'm assuming that you're a harm reductionist.
I'm a harm reductionist.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But in terms of cannabis, though, how do we work with big pharma? How do we stay true to the spirit of the culture that we have here, whilst also working with the big pharma?
I don't really have any desire to work within big pharma. I mean, as an American psychiatrist who's been prescribing for 25 years or something, they pull an awful lot of dirty tricks, and some of these corporations just have no conscience and no soul, and I appreciate that they're not people, although our government says otherwise.
But they're people we have to work with, though, if we're going to do this legally. We have to work with them. We could just do the easy thing, and I often say this to people, look, we could just not do this. We could just stay underground. And I have people who write to me and say, why are you doing this? Why do you have to work with the man? If you want your patients to have ayahuasca or MDMA, send them to me. I know a great guy down in Totnes, And it's like, that's cool, but there are at least 60,000 cases of untreated PTSD in this country. And as I said before, my patients are hard, tracksuit wearing, shaven-headed, tattooed blokes from Western Supermare who smoke fags and drink beer and watch television shows that I don't watch. They would run a mile if you wore a tie-dye t-shirt and talked about chakras, but they need MDMA more than anybody because they are broken, hurt people. So we have to talk to the man, not the man, we have to talk to the men in suits because they hold the regulatory contracts, and maybe they are all snakes, but we got to work with them, don't we?
Well, like this idea that MAPS is sort of making their own pharmaceutical business, I approve of that. I think that's a better way to go. We all know that MDMA really cannot be patented. I mean, you could make some sort of proprietary blend of S and R MDMA in theory. And the same thing with cannabis. I mean, this is a plant. You're not going to be patenting it. So where I practice in New York, we have a medicinal cannabis law in New York that is just grossly inadequate, that is all about tinctures and extracts and CBD and THC only, and no flavonoids and no terpenes and no flower, which kills me. I hate it. I hate that there's like one dispensary in all of Manhattan, and they sell very expensive pills and liquids, and you can't actually get any pot there. So I'm very frustrated by the sort of pharmaceuticalization of a flower. So, I mean, maybe that makes me more of a hippie flower child, but this idea of grow and give, where you can, grow your own medicine, I will hold on to that. I don't really like the idea of big pharma coming in. And also, certainly with MDMA, with psilocybin, with ayahuasca, optimally, this is in a very controlled environment, in a supervised setting. You're not just giving somebody a blister pack of psilocybin and sending them on their way. They're in some sort of a clinic setting, or they're in a one-to-one therapeutic relationship with a clinician. So I don't like the idea of it being sort of mass marketed and homogenized and commodified. I mean, it's very distasteful to me.
I think the hope is that we will take aspects of this kind of community and aspects of the non-Western uses of these drugs and develop a future for psychedelic therapy legally within the medical profession, but delivered through treatment centers that are holistic, where you not only have the medicine and the psychotherapy, but there's a whole broad spectrum of activities, yoga, Pilates, diet, exercise, lifestyle changes, and community, which are legal, but they're not in white-coated hospital settings. And I think we can do that, can't we?
I know why you add Pilates to that list.
my wife is a Pilates teacher. So
most people just say yoga and meditation, but Ben says yoga and Pilates.
It's kind of it's like posh yoga. So so I sometimes have these friends of mine from California who, they post on Facebook, oh man, it's really bad that the dispensary is this corporate thing and it's so bad. And I write back and go, will you stop moaning, right? Will you stop moaning? You guys in the States about how the cannabis industry, I could go to prison for 6 years for the few crumbs of green vegetable matter in a bag down my sock. That is outrageous.
Yes.
6 bloody years I could go to prison for that in this country, and you're moaning about whose name is it over the door of the dispensary. We have to change these ridiculous drug laws here and now and change this and stop putting people into prison for this benign activity. To sum up, and I'm going to not say any more other than thank you very much, because we got Rick Doblin coming up after this, so I want you to have the final words on the future of this movement and where we're going and breaking convention.
Well, I just did want to sort of respond to the drug policy issue. I'm sure you and I feel the same way, that people's drug use is a medical issue, it's a social issue, it's not a criminal justice issue. It doesn't belong in the criminal justice sphere. And I think a lot of us are working to change that. So I don't have any, brilliant capping statements about where we're going with psychedelic medicine. I'm 51 now. I've been sort of involved in this community since my early 20s. The thing I always sort of joke about with Rick is like, are you watching your cholesterol? Are you keeping your blood pressure down? Because are you eating healthy? Because we know this is a long game. It's taken decades to slowly sort of chip away at the prejudice and the bureaucracy, but
well, I'm lucky because I'm just 19, so I'm probably
you are younger than I. But I feel like we're making progress. I think Hefter and MAPS and Beckley and all the other groups that I'm not mentioning. One thing that I love is that people are really working together. We're not doing this kind of territorial pissing, which I see a lot with in the American cannabis movement. There's all this infighting with NORML and MPP and DPA, and I'm like, aren't we all on the same team? I mean, don't we all want the same things? So I like how we're all sort of getting along and moving forward. This is the first time coming to sort of a European gathering instead of American gathering, and it's nice to see that on another continent, a lot of the same conversations are going on. It's very heartening. So I appreciate you putting this together. I imagine it was a lot of work. So thank you,
It's
Ben,
fantastic
for this.
fun. And thank you, Dr. Julie Holland,